There's a kind of silence that doesn't bring peace. Not the hush of snowfall or the stillness before dawn. This one is heavier. It settles in your stomach like lead, presses against your chest like an invisible hand. You know the kind. You send a message, nothing. You speak, and the reply is the echo of your own voice. They were just there. They laughed with you, shared secrets, made promises. Now, you're met with stillness, not by chance, not by accident, but by design. There's something deeply unsettling about being deliberately ignored. It's more than just the absence of sound. It's the presence of a decision. Someone chose not to speak to you. Someone chose not to see you. And suddenly you start questioning everything. Did I say too much? Was I too needy? Maybe they're just busy. Or maybe they're trying to teach me a lesson. This is where the descent begins. Not with a scream, but with silence. It doesn't shout. It doesn't hit. It doesn't leave visible bruises, but it wounds. Quietly, systematically. Because the absence of a response isn't empty. It's full of intent. It's how they make you squirm, how they make you desperate. And when you break the silence first, when you reach out, apologize, beg, that's when the game is won. You never agreed to play, but you're already losing. The silent treatment isn't just someone being in their feelings. It's a message, one you're forced to decipher alone, without a key. It happens in relationships, in friendships, in families. Sometimes it's passive. Sometimes it's ice-cold calculation. But always, it's control. Not all silence is golden. Some silence is a cage. You feel the walls tightening. You replay the last conversation over and over, trying to find what triggered the void. But this isn't about logic. It's about power. And the person withholding their words, they know exactly what they're doing. They don't just want distance. They want you to notice it, to feel it, to need it to stop. Because once you do, you'll give them exactly what they want. Your attention, your regret, your submission. The worst part isn't the quiet. It's the noise inside your head, the doubts, the shame, the need for repair. You start to bargain. I'll give them space. I'll apologize first. I'll be better. And in doing so, you twist yourself into something smaller, more agreeable, more dependent. That's the real purpose. Not punishment, but rewiring. To condition you slowly to fear disconnection. To walk on eggshells before you even know they're there, because next time, you'll think twice before speaking freely. Next time, you'll try harder to avoid the silence, and just like that, they don't have to say a word. To shape who you become. Silence, when used with intent, is not absence. It's architecture. It builds walls, invisible ones. Tall enough that you can't climb over, wide enough that you can't reach across. And when someone you care about suddenly goes quiet, those walls aren't just between you and them. They're inside your mind. To understand how this works, how silence becomes a weapon, we have to dissect it. Not as a lapse in communication, but as a deliberate form of emotional withholding. It starts small. A delayed reply, a missed call. They used to respond in seconds. Now it takes hours or days. When you ask what's wrong, they say, nothing. But you feel it. Something's changed. They pull back, not physically, but emotionally. They become a ghost with a pulse, present but unreachable. This is emotional withholding, and it's not random, it's calculated. Because emotional withholding isn't about silence for peace. It's about silence for power. See, when someone cares about you, your attention becomes currency. Your affection, your guilt, your anxiety. These are all forms of payment. And silence? It's how they raise the price. By pulling away, they create scarcity. Suddenly, their affection feels rare. Their presence, a luxury. And you, unknowingly, become the one chasing. Trying to fix something you didn't break. This is the twisted genius of emotional withholding. They give you just enough to stay hooked. A glance, a half smile, a single sentence after hours of nothing. And when you respond with relief, they know it worked. You're conditioned, like a rat in a box, trained by uncertainty. A reward, then punishment. A flicker of warmth, then ice. You start responding not to their love, but to their absence. It's intermittent reinforcement, a concept stolen straight from the playbook of behavioral psychology. The same mechanism that makes slot machines addictive. You don't know when the next payout will come, but you believe it will, eventually. And that belief keeps you coming back. They won't yell, they won't insult. That's too obvious, too easy to recognize. Instead, they'll let you torture yourself. You'll spiral in your mind, trying to decode them. Rewriting your memories, second-guessing your tone, your words, your timing. And the more confused you are, the more power they have. Because while you're playing checkers, searching for logic, they're playing chess. And silence? It's their queen. In this game, words are not tools of connection. They're bait. And silence is the hook. Eventually, you start anticipating the cold shoulder before it even happens. You self-censor. You agree when you don't want to. You apologize when you haven't done anything wrong. You shrink. Because silence hurts more when you've tasted connection. It's not the absence of love that wounds. It's its sudden withdrawal. Emotional withholding thrives on that contrast. Kindness, then nothing. Laughter, then a void. A shared moment, then a locked door. This inconsistency isn't clumsiness, it's orchestration, and its purpose isn't resolution, it's destabilization. They want you off balance, guessing, hungry for approval, afraid of setting them off, because if you're focused on winning them back, you're not asking the real question. Why do they need to disappear? To feel powerful? This is the darkest part of it all. Silence isn't just silence, it's surveillance. They're watching how you react, measuring how far you'll bend. Will you chase them? Will you beg? Will you promise to change? And when you do, they've won. Not because they've broken you, but because you've started breaking yourself. Voluntarily. You'll learn to speak less, to need less, to be less, and they won't have to raise their voice once. This isn't conflict, it's conditioning. And in their silence, they're not just avoiding the conversation, they're rewriting the rules. There's a point when silence stops being absence and becomes assault. Not loud, not obvious, but no less violent. At first, it feels like discomfort. You notice the space where their voice used to be. You feel the drop in temperature when they enter the room and say nothing. You sense the chill in their eyes, even when they look at you. But slowly, that discomfort becomes something else, something heavier, a pressure that builds with every unanswered word, and then it breaks you, quietly, completely. This is the turning point, where silence becomes psychological warfare, and you, the target, don't even know you're in a battle. They say warfare is about territory. This kind is no different, except the terrain they want isn't land. It's your mind, your confidence, your sense of reality. Because when someone weaponizes silence, they're not just punishing you, they're training you. You begin to believe that your emotions are dangerous, that your needs are too much, that your voice causes damage. You ask questions like, should I have just stayed quiet? Maybe I shouldn't have brought it up. I always ruin things when I talk. But this war, it's not about what you said. It's about them having the power to decide when you're heard, when you're loved, when you're allowed back in. The silence becomes a gate. And they are the gatekeeper. They don't slam the door. That would give you something to resist. Instead, they leave it slightly ajar. Just enough to keep you hoping. That hope is what keeps you obedient. Because every time you think, maybe today they'll talk to me again, you compromise more of yourself to earn it. You tell yourself you deserve this, that this is what love looks like, broken, unpredictable, conditional. But what you're feeling isn't love. It's psychological captivity. See, psychological warfare relies on one thing above all: control through confusion. They want you to doubt your own perception, to feel guilty without knowing why, to say sorry for things you can't name. And because they don't explain the silence, you fill the gaps yourself. With shame, with fear, with desperate apologies. This creates a loop, a behavioral trap. They withdraw. You chase. They return. You relax. They go silent again. And this time, you chase even harder. Each cycle tightens the leash, until one day, you're no longer reacting to their silence. You're living in fear of it. That's when they've won. Because now, they don't need to withhold affection anymore. You do it for them. You censor yourself. You walk on eggshells. You beg for closeness like a privilege instead of a right. And they watch, not always cruelly. Sometimes they smile. Sometimes they say they just needed space. But deep down, they know the silence wasn't for healing. It was for control. They've blurred the line between love and punishment, between distance and dominance. And now, you're afraid to speak, because you've learned the cost of being heard. The worst part of psychological warfare isn't the damage you can see. It's what it turns you into. You become hyper-aware, reading between lines that don't exist, tracking the rhythm of their moods like a code you're desperate to crack, sacrificing your own emotional clarity to maintain someone else's comfort. That's the cruelty of it. They don't take your voice. They make you give it up. They don't lock the door. They teach you to never try the handle again. It's easy to underestimate silence. It doesn't leave a mark, but it leaves something else. It plants doubt in the soil of your self-worth. And when that doubt grows, it chokes out everything else, until the only thing left is the echo of your own voice, asking questions no one will answer. And that's not just silence, that's domination. Without a single word spoken, not all silence is cruel, and not all withholding is manipulation. Sometimes people go quiet because they're overwhelmed, because they're protecting themselves from conflict, from pain, from saying something they'll regret. But here's where it gets dark. Abusers know that, and they use it. They hide behind that ambiguity, wearing it like a mask. I'm just trying to calm down. I need space to think. You're the one pushing me. Reasonable words, until you start noticing how often they use them to avoid accountability, to punish without admitting punishment, to stay in control while pretending to stay out of the fight. That's the dangerous blur. The one that keeps you second-guessing whether you're being hurt or just being paranoid. And the truth? It's designed that way. Because silence can look like self-protection, but when it becomes habitual, targeted, and strategic, it's something else entirely. It's not about calming the storm, it's about creating one. Here's the difference. When someone is truly overwhelmed, their silence is temporary, and it comes with care. They'll say, "I need a moment, but I care about you. I'll come back." There's clarity, not confusion, boundaries, not walls. But when silence is used to dominate, there are patterns. And they're chilling. The timing, always after you express a need, or question something, or stand up for yourself. The silence that follows isn't a retreat. It's a message. You've crossed a line, and they don't have to tell you what the line is, because once you start fearing the silence, you'll avoid triggering it altogether. This is when the confusion begins to mutate. You start to think their silence is your fault, that if you were softer, quieter, less emotional, they wouldn't need to pull away. You normalize it, call it just how they cope. Convince yourself they're just sensitive. You even start defending their behavior to others. She's just introverted. He's had a hard life. They're not good at expressing themselves. And maybe that's true. But the question isn't why they go silent. It's how their silence affects you. Does it make you feel safe or scared? Does it help the relationship grow, or does it make you feel small, wrong, ashamed? Control often wears the costume of retreat. It doesn't always raise its voice. Sometimes it steps back, lets you squirm, and waits for you to come crawling. This isn't protection. It's punishment. But because they say nothing, you can't accuse them of anything. There are no texts to show your friends. No voice memos, no evidence, just your anxiety, your pacing, your shame. The silence speaks volumes, but only you can hear it. They'll say, "You're overreacting. You always make everything about you. You're too sensitive." And that, right there, is the final twist. They silence you, then blame you for the noise in your own head. This is gaslighting in slow motion, making you question your emotional responses until you no longer trust your own instincts. And once that trust is gone, they don't have to control you anymore. You'll do it yourself. You'll hesitate to bring up your feelings. You'll swallow your discomfort. You'll stop asking for more. You'll become agreeable, predictable, silent. And they'll call that peace. The truth is, abusers exploit ambiguity. They thrive in the gray area between protection and punishment. They rely on your empathy to excuse their cruelty. They rely on your fear of being too much to keep you compliant. Because if you believe their silence is a wound, not a weapon, then you'll wait, and wait, and wait. For them to feel better, for them to come back, for the coldness to thaw. But they're not recovering. They're reinforcing. Every minute they don't speak is another thread in the web. And you're the one stuck, still wondering, was it something I did? Or just who I am? The answer doesn't come. Only silence does. And that's not miscommunication, it's design. And then one day, they speak again. A message, a smile, a soft, "Hey, how are you?" As if nothing ever happened. The silence breaks, but not like glass. More like ice melting over something long buried. They say they just needed time, that they didn't know how to express themselves, that you were being too intense, and they needed to protect their peace. You nod, maybe even apologize, because you're just relieved it's over. But it's not really. Because even when the silence ends, something else doesn't. The echoes, they follow you like shadows. Long after the words return, long after the distance closes. They live in the quiet moments, when they take a little too long to reply, when they sigh, when they pause before speaking. Your mind fills the spaces again. But now it's not just uncertainty, it's fear. You flinch at emotional stillness. You brace for disappearance. It's not just what they took during the silence, it's what they left behind. That nagging sense that love is unstable, that your feelings are dangerous, that being close to someone is always conditional. You stop trusting comfort. You stop trusting yourself, because their silence rewrote you. It hollowed out the center of your emotional world and replaced it with a question mark. You became someone who learned to read every pause like a threat, to anticipate rejection in every delay, to apologize for needing clarity. And they never had to raise their voice, never had to curse you out. All they had to do was disappear. Now you find yourself doing it too, pulling away before others can, swallowing your words before they become too much, choosing silence. Not because it heals, but because it feels safer than speaking. That's the most haunting legacy of emotional withholding. It teaches you to mute yourself, not just for them, but for everyone after. You carry that silence into every new room, into every new relationship, smiling on the outside, careful not to cross invisible lines, lines someone else drew long ago. It becomes a reflex, a language of absence, because somewhere along the way, you learn that your voice comes with consequences, that your needs are dangerous, that if you reach out too far, someone might vanish again, so you stay small, you stay quiet. You wait for someone to prove they'll stay. But here's the twist. Sometimes they do, sometimes the next person listens, holds space, speaks gently, and in those moments, something stirs, something almost forgotten. Your voice. Faint, fragile, but still there. And maybe, just maybe, it starts to believe that not every silence is a threat, that not every quiet moment is a countdown, that not every step forward has to end in retreat. But the echoes? They never fade completely. They wait in the back of your mind, in the pit of your stomach, in the hollow between heartbeats, listening for the next silence. So now we sit in that space between words, The place where silence once ruled like a ghost king. And maybe, for the first time, you're no longer trying to fill it. You just feel it. The weight of it, the texture, the shape it carved into you. It's strange, isn't it? How something so empty can leave behind something so heavy. But you don't have to carry it the same way anymore. You've seen what it is. Not just a pause, not just quiet, but a kind of control dressed in stillness. And once you see it, really see it, it can't hide again. You start to recognize it in others. The way they withhold, the way they disappear just enough to make you doubt yourself. And you start choosing differently. Not louder, not angrier, just more awake. You learn the difference between silence that heals and silence that harms. Between a boundary and a punishment. And maybe one day, when someone goes quiet again, you won't chase. You won't shrink. You'll simply stand in your own voice and let the silence speak for itself. Because now you know. It was never about the silence. It was about the message buried inside it. And some messages don't deserve to be heard, only watched as they fade quietly into the dark.